Did you guys know that Kawhi Leonard's sister was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of an elderly woman? On August 2019, Kawhi's older sister Kamisha Williams and her friend Candace Townsell attacked an 84-year-old elderly woman in a casino in California. Kamisha followed the elderly woman to the bathroom and Candace stayed at the door and looked to see if anyone was coming. Kamisha beat up the 84-year-old woman and went into her purse and took $1,000. A witness who was in another stall heard the whole thing go down and found the elderly woman unconscious, and then she saw both suspects run out of the casino exit. Unfortunately, she suffered a fractured skull and passed away 4 days later. Both women were caught and arrested and were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But Kamisha has kept her innocence and denies any involvement in the murder.
Can you tell a house is haunted just by looking at it? Today we're going through the Zillow listing of the real Conjuring house, and we're gonna see. This is an 18th century farmhouse in Rhode Island, and it was owned by the Perrin family in the 70s. When they first moved in, the mom would notice that her broom would move on its own, and things around the house would mysteriously be out of place. But things in the house quickly got way worse. The kids noticed a smell of rotten eggs everywhere, and every morning at 5:15 their beds would shake. They realized they were being haunted by the ghost of a woman who died on the property in the 1800s named Bathsheba. She was reportedly practicing witchcraft in the house. It's believed that she killed a child during a satanic ritual by sticking a needle into its head. Then we all know the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren coming to the house and getting rid of Bathsheba. But according to people who have lived in this house and visited this house, there's still definitely something haunting the place. Would you ever stay in this house?
Craziest crimes of all time. A man by the name of Sean broke 7 different laws in an effort to be sexy. He did this by breaking into a woman's home, stealing her lingerie, and walking the streets of Sacramento wearing it. A man by the name of Rutledge Dees IV was recently arrested after pretending to have a disability so that nurses would change his dirty diapers. Apparently this was his kink, so he received therapy instead of prison. A woman was upset at her boyfriend Christopher because he let out a horrific fart. Christopher, who was slightly offended, proceeded to headbutt and choke her before she could escape and call police. A woman posing as a psychic promised her clients that she could put a special blessing on their money and double it overnight. Spoiler alert, the next day she ran off with over $100,000. A woman from Michigan has been described as feral after biting off another woman's ear. Why, you may ask? Well, she believed that she was a werewolf and the other woman was a vampire.
Alice remembered passing 3-year-old Mary Edens out of a window. But when Alice escaped the burning building herself, Mary was nowhere to be found. On Christmas Eve 1924, 200 people in Oklahoma crammed into this one-story schoolhouse for a Christmas Eve program. But as the program was ending, the Christmas tree got knocked over and the candles on it caused the entire school to erupt in flame. A woman named Alice was there holding her 3-year-old niece Mary Edens. The last thing she remembered before passing out from smoke inhalation was passing Mary through the window to a stranger on the other end. But when Alice awoke, she learned the news that no one had seen Mary since the fire. Not only that, but everyone who had died in the fire was accounted for, and Mary was the only person missing from the event. So where did she go? Well, 30 years later, a woman shows up to Mary's parents' house claiming to be Mary. And while Mary's parents accepted her as their child, some people in the community started thinking something was wrong. This whole story is crazy, and I cover the whole thing on my podcast. Give it a listen and let me know your theories.
Police have arrested a Chucky doll for threatening members of the public with a knife. This month, police in Mexico arrested a doll. Terrifyingly, they had been made aware of a Chucky doll who, along with its owner, were threatening the public in Monclova. If you're not already aware, the doll comes from the 1988 film Child's Play. In the movie, the serial killer turns into the doll, which then begins a terrifying crime spree. The owner of the doll has only been identified as Carlos N. He was reportedly scaring the public with the doll, threatening them with a knife and demanding money off them. Both Carlos and the doll were charged with disturbing the peace and putting others' integrity at risk. The doll was handcuffed and taken to the police station. They both had mugshots taken, and there has been some controversy over whether or not the officers were taking their job seriously. The police officer who put cuffs onto the Chucky doll has been reprimanded.
This is Ian Watkins, one of the worst pedophiles in world history. And just recently, he was actually taken hostage in prison and stabbed multiple times by fellow inmates. So if you guys follow my TikTok, you know how much I hate this guy and how truly disturbing the whole story of Ian Watkins is. I mean, to cut it short, the police failed multiple times to arrest this guy. He assaulted an infant child multiple times on video with the consent of the child's mother, and the transcripts from his court proceedings are some of the most disturbing things that I've ever read with my two eyes. I mean, this guy truly is the worst of the worst. But yeah, like I said, just yesterday he was held hostage for 6 hours in prison by some inmates that recently got into the prison. They held him down, stabbed him multiple times, and gave him life-threatening injuries. According to some outlets, there were fears yesterday that they thought he might pass away from this attack, but today they revealed that he's probably going to make a full recovery. Truly though, I hope that this guy's life in prison is a living hell. He did some of the worst things imaginable. And with the way that these crimes are treated in England, he really didn't get that long of a sentence compared to what he did. If there are any more updates, I'll share them here, but I knew that some of y'all would care about this.
Imagine going through your father's computer only to find hundreds of nude photos of yourself. That's exactly what happened to 39-year-old interior designer Jade Jenks. On December 31st, 2020, Jade was cleaning her stepfather's house when she found her own photos on his computer. Her stepfather, Tom Merriman, was at the doctor's when she found out, and she picked him up and then took his life. These nudes were taken about 10 years ago by her boyfriend at the time, and she has no idea how her stepfather got a hold of these photos. Prosecutors believe that Jade drugged Tom first, and then she strangled him in her car after she picked him up from his appointment. She then tried to bring Tom into his house using a wheelchair, but he fell onto the driveway, and since she couldn't pick him back up, she just piled boxes on top of him to hide him from neighbors. Jade has maintained her innocence and says that she did not murder Tom and that she found him like that, but she panicked and that's why she never called for help. Although Jade does claim that growing up, her stepfather was very inappropriate with her and she felt manipulated by him, but she never told anyone. Investigators did find a lot of evidence against Jade, and one of these things were that she texted two people telling them that she did murder Tom. Jade was eventually convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole in 25 years.
This fast food employee allegedly shot at a customer over curly fries. A Jack in the Box employee from Euston allegedly shot a customer in an argument at a drive-thru, according to a lawsuit. The dispute appears to have started over curly fries. It's reported that there is a 23-minute video of the fight which took place on March the 3rd, 2021. The incident involved a man, his pregnant wife, and their 6-year-old daughter. They had ordered 2 combo meals at the Jack in the Box near Euston Airport. When they received their order, they told the lady at the window that their curly fries were missing. This then apparently escalated into an argument. The man had requested the manager, at which point it's alleged that the employee, Alonia Ford, started launching ice and ketchup packets at the family. She then apparently walked away from the window and returned with a gun. She's accused of firing shots into the family truck, which quickly sped away. The family then called the police. Now, the employee in question was known to have a prior criminal record from 2012, and some believe that Jack in the Box didn't do enough to background check their employee. Alania was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of deadly conduct. She got sentenced to 1 year of deferred adjudication, which is basically like probation.
I was entombed alive and found 9 years after my disappearance. My name is Sabora Gagani. My tale is a dark saga of a past that seemed to have been buried. But everything resurfaced when my murderer committed a new heinous crime. I was a young Italian woman of Albanian origin, only 22 years old in 2014. That year, I decided to move to the picturesque town of Torremolinos in the south of Spain, with my Italian companion, Marco Gallo Romero, who was 36 years old at the time. It was in the heart of a distant summer, on July 7th, that my life changed forever. I vanished without a trace, and my cell phone stopped emitting any signal. My family in Italy grew worried and began contacting Marco, who claimed that we had parted ways and that I had decided to return to Italy to live with my mother. But my mother, knowing her daughter well, knew that I would have informed her of any planned return. The anxiety escalated when she revealed that I had been assaulted by Marco a few weeks before my disappearance. 9 long years after my disappearance, fate brought me back into the spotlight when Marco was arrested by the police in Malaga, Spain, for brutally murdering his new companion Paula with 14 stab wounds. Upon arriving at the police station, he came across a photo of me on a missing persons poster and coldly confessed to my murder. He told investigators that my body was buried in his own apartment. If you want part 2, leave a comment below.
I was brutally tortured and murdered at the tender age of 14, all because of racism and hatred. I am Emmett Till, a young African-American boy whose harrowing tale ignited a pivotal moment in the civil rights movement. In 1955, at the age of 14, I journeyed to Mississippi to visit family. Little did I know, this voyage would etch a significant mark in history. One fateful day, while at a local store, I was accused of whistling at a white woman, Carolyn Bryant. This act, fueled by false accusations and racial prejudice, triggered an unimaginable chain of events. The core of my story lies in the brutal and senseless violence that ensued. Carolyn Bryant's husband and his half-brother abducted me from my uncle's home, where I was brutally beaten and tortured. They then shot me in the head and cast my body into the Tallahatchie River. My murder sent shockwaves across the nation and galvanized the civil rights movement. My mother, in a courageous act, decided to hold an open casket funeral, allowing the world to witness the horrifying repercussions of racism and hatred. The images of my battered body became a symbol of the injustice endured by African Americans. My death sparked outrage and a renewed determination to fight for equality. My story became a catalyst for change, inspiring countless activists and leaders to continue the struggle for civil rights. Together, we can forge a world where every person is treated with dignity and respect.
A cold-blooded killer free to walk the streets after being released from prison. Michael Hollower, now aged 68, has spent 42 years behind bars for the murder of his neighbour Mary Kitt in Galway Island. Michael was in trouble with the law from a very young age. In 1971, he stole a car and knocked down 2 pedestrians, leaving them with serious injuries. He then attacked a woman at a train station in Galway and then stepped it up even further when he abducted a 14-year-old student and held him hostage for 2 hours, assaulting him during the ordeal. For that attack, he spent 12 months in prison. He was then released, and 6 years later, he became a murderer. Michael says that he needed money and he chose Mary's house because he knew that she lived alone. He broke into Mary's house in the middle of the night and found her in bed upstairs. When she woke up, she told him that her handbag was downstairs, but instead of just taking the money and leaving, he grabbed a kitchen knife, went back up to her bedroom and stabbed her. He then knocked her over the head with an ashtray, and when he was leaving, he heard her coughing and realised she was still alive, so he went back and choked her to death. He then pushed her body under the bed, made her bed, and then left. Mary's body was found the next day by a friend who had a key to her house, and Michael was questioned by police as he lived nearby and had a criminal past. He confessed to the murder straight away and he was jailed in 1981. But in July this year, after finishing his sentence, he was released from Shelton Abbey prison and is now getting on with his new life. When asked if he's still a danger to the public, he simply replied, "At nearly 70 years old, I don't think there's much violence left in me."
Is this the world's most cursed object? This object is called the Cursed Vase of Bassano, Italy. And this story begins back in the 15th century, when a wedding was taking place close to Napoli, Italy. Apparently, the bride-to-be that day was given this gift, a vase, by somebody that she didn't know. But later, when the wedding was said to start, she was nowhere to be found. And when her groom went to go find her, he discovered her lifeless body lying on the floor in her wedding outfit, clutching the vase with a fierce grip. After the bride's funeral, the vase was then given to a family member who then, a few days later, died as well. The vase was then given to another family member, and what do you know, a few days later, they died from mysterious causes as well. The family then called in a priest for help recognizing this pattern, and the priest allegedly told them that either the vase was created with cursed materials or a curse had been placed upon the vase by the person who had given the gift. They then buried the vase on the grounds of a church as the priest instructed them to bury it on sacred grounds, and it disappeared for 500 years. But in 1988, a man mistakenly dug the vase up from the ground on accident and found a note with it that read, "Beware, this vase brings death." He then threw the note away and brought the vase to an auction house. The vase sold for €2,270 at the auction, but 3 months later the pharmacist who purchased the vase died as well, and his family sold the vase to a doctor. What do you know, 3 months after that doctor was dead too. It was at that point when an archaeologist from a local university stepped in and said that he knew the story of this cursed vase. But even though he knew the history of the curse, he decided to buy the vase anyways. And 3 months later, he died as well. So I mean, at this point, I don't know who the hell is buying this vase or why you would continue to buy this vase, but people began to notice that possessing this vase is really not a good idea. So the family of the archaeologist actually tried to throw the vase away, but a police officer that was walking by at that exact moment noticed them tossing it out the window. He tried to bring the vase back to the family, thinking that they had mistakenly knocked it out of the window or the doorway, but they refused to take it. He then, noticing that it was an old vase, decided to bring it to museums and universities in the area and tried to give them the vase. But they all knew the stories, they had read the news reports, and they refused to take it. So after once again talking to a local priest, he decides that the only place that this vase should be at is in the ground. Sacred ground, that is. So he takes it to the cemetery of a local church, buries it, and doesn't tell anybody where it is. People think that the vase is haunted by the murderous ghost of the bride who died on her wedding day. Or maybe it really was a curse, but regardless, this is the only picture that's ever been taken of the vase itself. It's from an old newspaper in the actual town where this vase legend came from. Let me know, do you think this is a real story, or do you think this is all made up?
Murdered by her best friends, 16-year-old Skylar Neese was lured to the woods by two people she trusted. Little did she know they'd already planned her death. Skylar lived in Star City, West Virginia with her parents. She was a fun-loving, down-to-earth teenager and was a sophomore in high school. Skylar and her two best friends, Sheila and Rachel, were inseparable, but on the night of July 6, 2012, everything changed. Her two best friends turned on her. They convinced Skylar to sneak out of her bedroom window after dark and join them in Sheila's car. Skylar had absolutely no idea what they had planned. As they pulled into some woodland, the girls counted to 3 as planned and then pulled out 2 kitchen knives and began to stab Skylar over and over. Once they were sure she was dead, they dragged her body into the woodland, covered her with dirt and twigs, and then went home. The next day, after finding Skylar's bedroom empty and her window open, her parents reported her missing, and she was at first treated as a runaway. Shockingly, both girls helped look for Skylar, and they even helped to distribute flyers. They were both living their lives without a care in the world, just like everything was normal, and Sheila was even posting on social media saying things like, "No one on this earth can handle me and Rachel. If you think you can, you're wrong." It wasn't until 6 months later that Rachel's conscience got the better of her and she actually confessed to police that her and Sheila had planned Skylar's death, and she led them to Skylar's remains. Sheila carried on with the social media posts, even posting this on the day that police confirmed that the remains were Skylar's. Her post then turned quite cryptic, and the month before she was arrested, Sheila posted saying, "We really did count to 3, obviously referring to the fact that they'd agreed to count to 3 before stabbing Skylar. When police searched Sheila's car, they found Skylar's blood, and on May 1st, 2013, both Rachel and Sheila were arrested. Sheila pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. She'll be eligible for parole in 2028. And Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after just 10 years. In May this year, Rachel actually became eligible for parole, and during her hearing, the real reason that they killed Skylar was revealed. Rachel and Sheila had actually been in a relationship and they didn't want Skylar to tell anyone, so they killed her. Following her hearing, Rachel was denied parole and she remains behind bars with Sheila at the Lakin Correctional Centre in West Virginia.
A case that ended with a shocking twist. On the 19th of February in 2008, 9-year-old Shannon Louise Matthews was reported missing by her mother, Karen. Shannon was last seen at 3:10 outside of her school, only half a mile away from her home. By the time Karen called 999, it was 6:48 p.m. in Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, and Shannon still hadn't returned home from school. Within hours of her disappearance, a massive police search began, ultimately involving over 250 officers and 60 detectives. Hundreds of neighbours, friends and family joined Karen Matthews in the search for her daughter. Karen made TV appearances begging the public to help her find Shannon alive. The Sun newspaper even offered a £50,000 reward to anyone who could provide information that helped with the investigation. But after 20 days of endless searching, Shannon was still nowhere to be seen. That was until the 14th of March, 24 days after she was first reported missing. Police had finally located Shannon, and she was alive. For 24 days, she had been hidden in the base of a bed in a flat belonging to a man named Michael Donovan. And Michael Donovan was the uncle of her mum Karen's boyfriend. So it turned out that Shannon's mum Karen was involved in her daughter's kidnapping all along. She had concocted this abduction plan hoping to claim the reward money after her daughter's safe return. Shannon was understandably shaken after this ordeal. She'd spent over 3 weeks restrained inside a bed, regularly being given substances as a means to sedate her. Ultimately, Karen Matthews and Michael Donovan were found guilty of kidnapping and false imprisonment, and obstructing the course of justice. But both have since been released from prison and are living under new identities. Shannon received regular therapy after the incident, later being given a new identity and being placed with a foster family.
This is 20-month-old baby Isaiah. Now do me a favor. Imagine for a moment that this is your daughter. Would you for any reason ever leave her home alone? I didn't think so. She, however, would. This is her 18-year-old mother, Verfi Cootie. I don't know if I'm saying her name right, and frankly, I do not care. Between the months of October and December of 2019, Verfi had left Isaiah home alone a handful of times, at least 5 times, with the longest period of time being 2 days. So 2 whole days, this baby is home alone to fend for herself. Now, on December 5th, 2019, decided she wanted to go out and celebrate her 18th birthday, even though baby Isaiah had been sick with the flu. Verfi had even canceled plans with the family because of Isaiah having the flu. I guess she was just like, I don't want to take her out because she's sick, which, okay, that's, that makes sense. It probably would be best not to bring the baby out with the flu. Instead of asking someone to watch Isaiah, Verfi goes to celebrate her birthday with her boyfriend, leaving Isaiah in the apartment. Once again, she goes 50 miles to London, and there she lives it up. On the 7th, this is 2 days after leaving Isaiah in the apartment, she was seen at a concert and even asked the DJ to give her a shout out for her birthday. So it would not be until almost 6 days later that Verfi would return to the apartment. So this is when she initially left the apartment on December 5th, 2019, which was a Thursday, at 5:40 p.m. This is her returning home on December 11th, 2019, which was a Wednesday, at 3:38 p.m. So all this time, Isaiah is just in the apartment by herself. When Verfi gets back into the apartment, she finds Isaiah unresponsive. And this is when she feels like it's a good idea to go on social media and tell her family members that Isaiah is just not doing well. At this time, Isaiah had already passed away. It would be 2.5 hours before Verfi would finally contact emergency services. And that's when they come and take Isaiah to the hospital, where she is pronounced deceased. So her cause of death was a combination of the flu as well as starvation. So just think about this. For exactly 5 days, 21 hours, and 58 minutes, this baby was by herself, sick with the flu, no food, no water, no milk, no one there to change her diapers, which resulted in a really bad diaper rash. Obviously, I know of children that have sat in diapers for even hours at a time and have gotten really bad rashes. So you can just imagine how bad this baby had to suffer. But it doesn't end there. And her mom is obviously arrested, rightfully so. She's a piece of trash. I'm sorry to say it. But in November of 2022, she pleads guilty to manslaughter and receives only 9 years. 9 years in jail for leaving her daughter home while she's out dancing and having a good time. 9 years, and this woman gets to live a free life while her baby doesn't get to live her life. I'm sure she will never have to suffer as much as this baby has had to suffer, but I hope that in jail, she feels just a little bit of that. I hope they don't treat her very well in there. And I definitely feel like she deserves more than 9 years.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Will you show us how you had your hands?
I had them up like this.
You tell us why you had your hands up close to your neck?
Because I saw what he did to Katie and I was scared he was going to do it to me.
This is 10-year-old Crystal Searles, one of the only living survivors of serial killer Tommy Lynn Sells. In the footage you see here, the killer himself explains in detail what happened inside the Harris family house.
I walked over here. I came over here, and there's a little girl sleeping here. And then I looked in here, 2 girls sleeping in here. I woke this girl up. The little girl on top was like petrified.
But when Sells left the house that night, there was one thing he never thought would happen.
What is your emergency?
I have a little girl just rang my doorbell.
It was like dead man tell no tale, and I thought I killed her.
Crystal Searles. She was just 10 years old when she came face to face with death. But she survived, outsmarting her killer. It was her courage that got Tommy Lynn Sells arrested and brought to trial, finally putting an end to his 20-year-long rampage.
I felt like he couldn't conquer me. He was going to be in that trial room because of I couldn't tell her anything.
Crystal's mother can't bear to break the news to Crystal that her best friend Kate is dead, and that Crystal is the only living witness that knows what happened.
When I walked into the crime scene, on the floor was a deceased young girl. The crime scene was extremely bloody.
Shocked by the gruesome nature of the crime, Texas Ranger John Allen still has no idea what he's about to face. He's told that there's a surviving 10-year-old and that she's ready to talk.
We told Crystal who we were, and at that point in time I assured Crystal that we are going to arrest the person or persons who did this to her. And at that point in time I was hoping I could back that up.
From her hospital bed, Crystal does her best to write a description of Katie's killer. A police artist makes a sketch from this description. Right away, the sketch, as well as Crystal's details, ring a bell to a friend of the family, who saw a man named Tommy working as a used car salesman fitting that description perfectly. Police get their hands on the individual's picture and present a photo lineup to Crystal.
And I explained to Crystal, I told Crystal, we have a photo lineup. And if you see the man that was in that residence that did this to y'all, please put your finger on him. You could see her eyes moving from one individual photograph to the next and focused in on one photograph. And Crystal took her right index finger and put it on the photograph of Tommy Lynn Sells.
Texas Ranger John Allen makes Tommy Lynn Sells his primary suspect, but nothing can prepare him for who Tommy Lynn Sells really is. It's January 2nd. Police move in on Tommy Lynn Sells' trailer. While the door is unlocked, Texas Ranger John Allen walks in and is met halfway by the suspect. He makes his arrest without any resistance. In fact, Sells even tells John Allen,
"I'm glad I finally got caught." And then we told him he was under arrest for murder.
Confessions are immediately obtained from him, as well as his agreement to do a walkthrough of the crime scene.
You doing this walkthrough of your own free will?
Oh, yes. I thought this to be very odd.